What happens when privacy becomes theft, reality itself begins to collapse, and the only way forward is to trust the chaos? Today's guest is Kathe Koja, award-winning author of the Dark Factory trilogy, including the just-released final installment, Dark Matter. Koja is a Detroit native who has spent decades pushing the boundaries of horror, weird fiction, and immersive storytelling. From her Bram Stoker award-winning debut, The Cipher, to her innovative approach to narrative that treats fiction as a contact sport between writer and reader. In this conversation, we dive deep into augmented reality apocalypse, the psychology of intimacy under constant surveillance, Detroit techno as creative fuel, and why chaos might be exactly what we need. This is the Dark Mind Podcast. If you enjoy the show, consider supporting it by subscribing to my Patreon, where you'll find exclusive audio narrative fiction horror stories narrated by me, Vincent Midgard. Head over to patreon.com/The Dark Mind Podcast and become a citizen of the darkness. You can also support the show for free by subscribing to my YouTube channel at youtube.com/The Dark Mind Podcast. Your support helps keep the dark conversation alive. So without further ado, I give you Kathe Koja. Kathe, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining me on this 7th day of December 2025. I came across your work on Bookstagram, and my interest was piqued when I read the concept for your Dark Factory trilogy. I'm incredibly interested in the alteration of consciousness through virtual reality and total environments. So I was really excited when I found that you had combined the two. So can't wait to get into the details of not only your newest release, but also the trilogy as a whole.
Well, I am always excited to talk about immersive fiction because I think the way that we are used to experiencing our media is very much, not so much fragmented, but say holistic. It's in many pieces and in many formats, and we're very sophisticated as readers and viewers, and I didn't see why that couldn't apply to fiction as well, why that couldn't apply to the concept of a novel. And so that was the big idea behind Dark Factory.
Yes. Very interesting. So I'm sure anybody listening to this is probably familiar with at least one, if not all, of the trilogy. But just in case, give a little brief synopsis. Your newest book, Dark Matter, is the third and final book in the Dark Factory trilogy. It's set in the near future world of immersive augmented reality and 24/7 media platforms. The novel follows several characters as reality itself begins to collapse. At the center is Ari Regan, an immersive experience producer caught between dangerous jealousy and passionate love for his husband, Felix. Their marriage is strained under the pressure of celebrity, corporate war, and ambition, so intense that failure feels like death. As the world ends, Ari attempts to create the party to end all parties, a party that never ends, a final immersive experience that blurs the line between what's real and what's chosen. And that is where the story really takes off. So, In Dark Matter, Ari and Felix are trying to maintain a marriage inside a world that demands everything be content. What happens to the psychology of intimacy when privacy is viewed as theft by your audience?
Well, I think too, part of the and every marriage, every partnership is a construct, and it's a construct between the people creating it, the people in it. And if both sides of that creation agree on what is private, what is not, what is intrusive, what is not, things would probably go a little more smoothly. But Ari and Felix have very different ideas of where the firewall should be. And to Felix, his own ascent to a really steep and startling celebrity felt very much to him like being pursued, being hounded, being boxed in and driven. And to Ari, who both respects and shepherds Felix's talent. Felix is an immensely talented DJ, an intuitive DJ, and is Ari always feels like it is his job to keep Felix happy, keep Felix working, keep Felix safe. But for himself, he doesn't have a lot of the world doesn't bother him. It just doesn't bother him the same way it bothers Felix. So areas where Felix might feel this is private or, we don't need people here, it just rolls off Ari's back. He doesn't pay any attention to it. So I think that as our celebrities and our artists, we want to be able to be close to them and have these parasocial relationships. And those can be, very fun and very fulfilling for the person reading or watching or listening, or as long as it's understood that somewhere along the line, these are real people and they're not the things that you see. They're not only that, and they deserve their own life and their own privacy. And most people can respect and understand that, but there are people who do not. And take it to an extreme that can become very dangerous, psychologically dangerous, or actually physically dangerous. And in Dark Matter, in fact, Felix has a bodyguard. Felix has a bodyguard all the time. The corporate entity who Ari is working with insists that Felix have a bodyguard at all times. And so there's that extra layer of I did a lot of reading and research about corporate security and high net worth individuals, as they say, who who are presumed to always need some kind of level of security. And that is a really intense and difficult dance for the bodyguard to allow them their space and allow them that place to just be people, but also to, fulfill their own mandate of I have to keep you safe and weirdos can come from anywhere. And so that's my job. So if you also factor in the emotional component of people always want something from us. People always want something they want a gig, they want a three-way, they want an interview, they want all these things from us. And if Ari is seeing that, it's like, well, that's the gig, that's part of the gig. And we just assess what happens. Some people we let in, some people we don't. But if Felix feels like all of this is, there's strangers in my house all the time, that friction can become very intense. And at the beginning of Dark Matter, we are at a point of big friction between them as a couple.
Has there ever, I mean, this is kind of a personal question. Has there ever been an instance of art imitating life where, I mean, you're a well-known author. Have you ever had any issues with obsessive fans?
I think sometimes, again, people are expecting things from anyone who is putting their work out there. And I've never had, a safety problem or anything like that. But there are people who expect a level of, what do I want to say, of continual contact that you would not do in real life. You would not expect of a physical person that you knew or met at the coffee shop or lived by or whatever. And that can become difficult only insofar as you don't want to disappoint people who are eager and interested to talk to you and meet you. And I love that. I'm excited to do that always. And I've met friends that way. I've met collaborators that way. I met Charlie Athanas, the Dark Factory VR artist. Um, I just contacted him. And so he was willing to talk to me, and we, worked together and we became friends. But I think there are people who might put a different template on a relationship than a relationship can bear, or that is even feasible. Nobody can be available 24/7.
Yeah. And you only have so much emotional bandwidth.
Oh yeah, 100%. Or even bandwidth at all.
Yeah.
It's like after a certain point, right, you need to,
Decompress.
little bit.
Yeah. Well, you've described the series as capturing an axis of energy and change like Detroit techno or pre-punk glam. What is it about those cultural moments that mirrors what's happening in the book?
I think especially the history of Detroit techno. I'm a Detroit girl, and so much work, so much really great work was being done under the radar and became more accessible to, or more became known by people in Europe, specifically people in Germany and Berlin, than it was known here in the States. And so it's the idea that something can be happening, something really world changing can be happening right under your nose, but you might not know that. And it was also a way of looking at music or experiencing music in a way that had not been done before. And the same with the collision kind of the end of glam and the beginning of punk, where something had reached a particular end, something was coming to an end, and something else was almost its antithesis was being born. And there's a great deal of energy in those collisions and in those, while one thing is like rolling off the cliff and the other thing is like blasting out of the canyon, there's a big vortex of energy going on there. And one of the things that I love about Ari as a character is that he is always down for any kind of energy, and he sees it as an enhancement, not as a threat. So he would be glad to leap a chasm. He would not worry about falling. But I think those collision times, and I think we're in a very chaotic, and a lot of things are up for grabs right now. And there is a lot of energy, good and bad, in the culture, in, the zeitgeist, in the political world, surely. And all of that energy, it's neither good or bad. It's just there.
Mhm.
And so it's going to be what you make of it, or what it makes of you.
Why do you think human creativity peaks right before a collapse? Or, I mean, I guess when I think about it, sometimes after a collapse, because the Renaissance came after the plague.
Mhm.
So,
I would think that it's very analogous to the same reason people want to go out to lunch after a funeral,
hmm.
because you're alive.
Oh, okay.
You're
I got you.
alive. You're like,
Yeah.
okay, I have seen this thing to its end, and it is a very primal feeling to kind of reassert that life force by saying, I'm still alive. And in fact, in Dark Matter, there's a fetish club, and their tagline is, I'm alive, baby. And that's it, right?
Yeah.
I'm alive. And so I think those moments where we come really close to collapse, or we do go into collapse and decline, and then we kind of climb back out of it, it's a life force. And I don't think there's anything more alive than creating.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, critics have called the book a dizzyingly ambitious psychological cat and mouse game wrapped in cyberpunk rave gear. So, when you were structuring Dark Matter, how did you decide what to leave ambiguous so the reader has to do their own psychological tracking?
Oh, I always do that. I That's the fun, right?
Uh-huh.
That's the fun. Dark Factory is in some ways unique in my own process. When I began the book, I knew that it was more than a print book, but I wasn't sure what to do with all the ancillary material that I already knew was part of the narrative. I didn't know what to do with that. And the image I like to use is of like the little cartoon man who's jumping up and down on the suitcase, trying to smash everything in. And I knew that wasn't correct, but I didn't know what was correct. And so Trisha Reeks at Meerkat Press has really been my creative partner in all of this, because Trisha was always down to try something new. And the whole site, darkfactory.club, has a ton of ancillary material. There are individual stories of the characters. There are the characters posting. There's me posting. There is fan art. There's video. There's music. There's all type of things that are part of this world. And Trisha was always game to try to figure out, okay, how can we do this? How can we make this happen? And we both believe that, fiction in that sense is a contact sport. It's for, especially for readers who are into these books, it's very participatory, and you want people to be able to get out as much as they want and put in as much as they want. And she and I had talked in the very beginning about saying, the books themselves, or the book at that time, and we did not know it would be a trilogy. We didn't even know there would be two books, but you see what happens. But that if people only wanted to read the print book, and if that was the only way that they chose to experience this story, that would be enough, that you would never feel like, oh, I don't want to look at this site, but oh, I'm screwed if I don't, or I'm going to miss something. We don't want people to have FOMO. It's like, if you read the books, you will get the story. However, if you want more, there's plenty more. And if you want to contribute, we like that even better. But it's kind of choose your own adventure. You can be as engaged as you choose to be with the material. And it's been so much fun trying to figure out what are ways we can invite people in. What do we want to offer people? How do we want to do this? Yeah, has spoiled me really for anything else.
Well, I started off with Dark Factory because I thought I'd be lost with Dark Matter. But would you say Dark Matter?
Dark Matter, I have had readers say to me that they weren't even aware it was a trilogy and they just read the book. And because what's also very different about these books is a very major character, Bunny Graves, debuts in the third book. And that is the first time that I have ever had anybody that major come in so late in the story. So this is very much Bunny's story, because each of these characters are really pivotal in their own way to the larger story. But you can't, it would have been an impossibly large book to put all of this stuff in. And then you have, the housekeeping job of saying, well, how would you even lay this out? How would you design this? There is a lot of art in the books, in the print books, and a lot of sidebar stuff, but we tried to be very clear and clean about the way those things were structured, so people would not feel, overwhelmed or irritated. I read a shit ton of books before we began this, with, let's call it, creative typography, creative layout, immersive stuff. And some of them were so annoying and irritating that I knew that I didn't want to do that. It's like, if I have to stop every goddamn page and look at something else, you are pushing me out of your narrative because now you're giving me a job and I don't
Mhm.
want a job. I came here for fun, right? I came here to enjoy this story. So we wanted to be very clear that if people just didn't even want to look at that stuff, they didn't have to. They weren't going to miss anything. There aren't any footnotes. So there are grace notes, but there are no footnotes.
Yeah, I guess because I had read Dark Factory once I read Dark Matter, I I was aware enough that I felt like I was missing some things, but I guess putting myself in the headspace of someone that hasn't read anything, I could see there not really being a problem
Right,
for
and
it being a
because Bunny is such a strong character and Bunny is so much a part of this third book and all her arc is new. So, and it is so interesting to see where she came from. There's a almost a throwaway line in Dark Park, the second book, where someone talks about, oh, Tom Hay was dancing with his girlfriend, and she's not even mentioned by name, but that was the girlfriend. That was the person, and she was there just kind of waiting to explode into life. I like Bunny a lot. Bunny is probably one of my favorite characters that I have ever written because she's so all of a piece. She's exactly who she is, and she has a very clear arc,
Mhm.
and she knows what she wants, and she was a lot of fun to write.
Nice. Well, Max, Casper, and Charm School are chasing ancient myth through virtual and, quote, real worlds. What role do you think myth plays in stabilizing or destabilizing the self in a future where reality is negotiable? And it's kind of odd to me how we still bring up myth to embody things that we're trying to explain, to kind of explain aspects of a philosophy we subscribe to. Like currently, right now, I think it's just pure Prometheus. I mean, we stole fire from the gods and we're fucking doing all kinds of crazy shit.
And those stories continue to have resonance and power because they do speak to a very bedrock kind of humanity and of consciousness. It is those stories still matter because they're still speaking to us and we can, as you just did, we can layer our own reality on top of the story, but the story still feels correct. The story is correct. There was a great lamented show on Netflix called Chaos, Kaos, and it was a retelling of the Greek myths in contemporary times. It was wonderful. I'm so sad that they killed it off, but it was in some ways it was very much the same model as Dark Factory. You didn't have to know who any of these people were to enjoy it, but if you did know, they had lots of little Easter eggs and little fun things in there, and it was a blast. If you're a classicist, you will love this show because there are so many things going on in it where you go, oh, that's that. Oh, that's that. But you don't have to know that to enjoy the narrative. Those myths work whether you consciously know they're there or not. And those stories, the book that I'm working on now after Dark Matter, also has a completely different universe and book and setup and idea, but that current of myth is still in there. And I think partially that has to do with the time we're in as well, because these are times of enormous change and a lot of, again, a lot of chaos. And chaos is a charm school. She's an Oxford scholar and a game scholar. And her thing is chaos is a nutritive medium. Chaos is, yeah, everything is descending, but there's no reason to be upset by that. And that's just the way the cycles turn. And that's the cycle we're in now. And where we're going to end up when it's over, who knows? But that's okay. We're going to play the game anyway, right?
Right.
We're still going to live and we're still going to learn what we can learn. And she is another character, Charm School, Charmian, who came in fully formed, and she is in many ways probably the complete opposite of Bunny Graves, except that she is also extremely focused and she's going to do what she's going to do. She's playing a very long game because she is looking at this arc of humanity and even at the idea of what are games for? Why do we still like to play games? What difference, what purpose does it serve us and what purpose does it serve culturally? And she was a lot of fun to write as well. And I didn't have to think or worry about her very much. I knew she was going to do what she was going to do.
Well, speaking of chaos, when the world ends, chaos begins is a promise more than a tagline. For you, is chaos in dark matter something to be feared or a necessary solvent for the next version of these characters?
I think they're stuck with it whether they like it or not.
Mm.
I think they are, and again, it's all about where do you meet, how do you meet that? All through the Dark Factory stories and the sidebar stories and the main narrative and all of that, the idea is, are you opening up to the world and what does the world have to give you or teach you? Or like Felix the DJ, Felix has always been a very intuitive and self-taught DJ. And when he and Ari get together and when he starts to play with Ari, he has an epiphany about, he calls it the hum, and that everything, literally everything in the world is connected, is operating on frequencies that meet and mesh with each other. And so what is the deeper meaning in that? And what is he supposed to do about it? And so that's his whole entire arc, is thinking, I can hear this in everything now. And so I'm starting to listen for it in everything. And then what does that even mean? What is everything, right? So his path is very much focused on that. Ari's is the big picture. Um, Max is much more theory and much more meta and much more. Max started out as a reality artist, creating reality experiences in 3D human dirt, you know paths, trees, nothing else but that. And his approach to Dark Factory and the augmented reality was reluctant at best and hostile at worst. And his arc ends with him living in a game, basically. So he's had a huge journey, but it's all been very integral to the character. It is, all these things are things that Max would do. And I don't know if anyone else who has read this agrees with me. I find Max very funny. I'm very fond of Max, and I do find him very, very funny. And Ari thinks he's funny too. Ari thinks he's funny. But he is completely sincere. He's as sincere in his own quest as Felix is sincere in his. So they both really mean it. And they really want to find out what is the best way to operate in these conditions of chaos. And what am I here for? Why am I doing any of this? What's the point?
Well, still kind of staying on the chaos track, you've called immersive fiction a shared making between writer and reader. When you were finishing this trilogy, what did you feel you had to trust the reader to do on their side of the equation, particularly in the most chaotic sections?
I wanted them to, and I want this for anything that I'm working on. I always trust the reader because the reader is at least half, if not three-quarters of everything that's happening. I mean, they are the dancer and the dance. They are everything. And because all narrative is a conversation, right? So without the reader, without the other person, you're talking to yourself in an empty room, and that's not what it's for. What I wanted them to do, or what I hoped that they would do, was trust the narrative, because I was trusting it. When I began this book, I had no idea that these other things would exist or what we would do with it. Or, Trisha and I have been working on this for like 5-6 years. It's a lot of work. And we often had no idea. what we were doing or what was going to happen,
Uh,
but we kept on doing it. And that's what I would hope and invite readers to do, is to just come and read and keep reading through it and keep putting your own interpretation on things or your own energy on things. And if you're interested in a character, if there's more on the site to look at, then look up that character and see what else there is to learn about them, or what do you like about them, or what don't you like, or make some art about them, or I mean, the possibilities are pretty endless. We also wanted this to be, and that's the VR idea as well, that it will be a playground as well, where people could use the dark factory feeling and idea and tropes and make something of their own.
well, when reality collapses in the novel, some characters thrive while others disintegrate. What determines who survives a breakdown of meaning?
I think it's a great question, and I think it's very germane to the third book, especially. There are two characters, Matthias Bergeron, who's his shtick is he's the bad boy, the grown-up bad boy gamer, and he had some issues with the studio he was working with, and they banned him, and he's bitter and all this, so he's going to do his own thing, and he's immensely talented, but he's also immensely he thinks the sun shines out of his ass, so he's hard to work with.
I just got a vivid image.
Right. But Ari is in the middle between Matthias Bergeron and this other guy, Tom Hay, who Bunny begins the book as like his girlfriend. And Tom Hay is a corporate person, a business person operating at a very high level of commerce, who also had an experience in his college years that defined the rest of his life, that he really has never been able to sufficiently explain to himself. And it kind of shone a light on maybe a kind of emptiness that he carries around. And ever since, he's been looking for a way to remedy is probably too strong a word, but to rhyme with that. And he's trying to control this inrush of chaos and change. And that's not possible. I don't care how much money you have. It's just not possible. And both of these men have very strong egos. They're almost, you know, one's super ego, one's id. I mean, and Ari's trying to keep a middle course because he's saying, I need both of these guys to make this experience that I want for Felix. And I have to try to find a way to make them work. But if you think the same way with art, the same way with anything that operates both within and without you, if you try to take full control of that, it will not work. It will not work. The thing is not, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't operate that way. And you can either go along with it, you can let go of it, or you can get run over. And chaos, escalating chaos just kind of intensifies that process.
Well, kind of a callback, I suppose, to your life being content. How does the presence of the quote audience, the constant stream of watchers in the book, change the moral calculus of what the main characters are willing to do?
I don't know that it does. In Dark Park, there's an incident at a festival that is very upsetting and frightening to Felix, not only for his own sake, but for the audience. And that's probably the peak moment for that kind of worry. And where does my responsibility lie towards other people who are experiencing this music that is so powerful that it is causing people to act out and maybe cause danger to other people, danger to themselves. In Dark Matter, there is a group called the Bridesmaids, and the Bridesmaids are very intent on experiencing art in a very particular and violent way. And they have already decided that that's cool and that's what they're going to do. Felix worries if the work that he's trying to do will not be able to contain safety for the people experiencing it. And that worries and frightens him a lot. But I don't know that even that is containable or controllable. Certainly if you are putting on a festival, then you damn well have to have security and you damn well have to have, first aid and all those physical things. But to contain or to mitigate any kind of psychic uh, chaos or even damage, I don't think that's controllable either.
Hmm. Well, closing the Dark Factory arc, Ari, Felix, Max, and Charm School reach desperate energies in cultural collapse. Which character's endpoint surprised you the most in what they became or refused to become?
Nobody.
Nobody?
Nobody. Some of this has been coming for such a long time. Ari and Ari and Felix and Ari and Max were, dyads in the beginning of Dark Factory. And the surprise to me in this book was Bunny because I didn't see her coming. But where she began and where she ended up, and I won't spoil Bunny's arc, but I think that's inherent in the character. And I think any realistic fiction, any fiction that tries to depict real human people going through things, um, we become more of what we already are. Behavior can change, but I don't believe we change inherently. What the way I might choose to act or not act or, be part of something or refuse to be part of something, that's behavior and that can change. But what I bring to the party is who I am. So yeah, nobody really surprised me. I was happy for some people, so for other people, not. I was very happy for Max. Other people, not so much. But yeah, they didn't surprise me.
Well, wanted to ask you about some of your other work. In your work Under the Poppy, which deals with performers on the fringes of society, what did you learn about the psychology of surviving as an artist when your value is tied to entertainment? Because, I mean, like making a living doing something artistic, it always seems kind of like a house of cards because you can be objectively talented, produce objectively good art, and have your fans, but then some weird change in the zeitgeist or, just any number of things, it seems like it can sever that tenuous hold that you have on your audience.
And that I think, and then the answer to that, and I'll go back to the poppy, but the answer to that is you just keep following the imperative of whatever the thing is that you're trying to make. And you trust that what you are doing has enough resonance that the people who I really 100% believe that the books find their readers. They
Hmm.
will find them. I've seen it happen over and over again. I found things that I had no idea that I needed. And after you read them, you can't imagine how did I live this long, without knowing this book. But in the Under the Poppy story is about two men who are itinerant puppeteers in Victorian times. And that arc also, that's also a trilogy. And that arc is pretty much from the end of, again, a time of big chaos and change, the end of the Victorian era and the beginning of kind of the, quote, modern era. And how does a very marginal art form, puppetry is, I love puppetry. I think it is so brilliant and it's so old. It is as old as we are. And I have over and over seen as a watcher, as a producer, how people react differently to a puppet than they will react to another human being. I have put a hand puppet on my hand and done classroom visits with grad students who will speak directly to the puppet and engage in a completely different way because it's such a liminal figure. It's alive, but it's not. It's real, but it's not. it's like having a cartoon character come to life, right? And it's disarming because it's, just a puppet, it's just a toy, but it's very much not because it's very old and it's the Mr. Punch figure is found in almost every culture, and it is this little lawless creature that does exactly what it pleases and keeps getting away with, you know, he hits Judy over the head, he eats the baby, he battles with death. But it's this id character that we have a lot of resonance with, and everybody kind of feels like that from time to time. And the puppet is allowed to do whatever it needs to do and to die, but then to come back. And in the end, it's just, it's made out of what? It's made out of imagination, and some constructed material. So for people to stake their entire lives and safety, um, and love on that equation, I thought was just fascinating. And I had a ball with those books.
I just had to. If you're a fan of puppets, I don't know if you've ever seen or heard this guy,
Mhm.
Randy Feltface. This guy is objectively hilarious.
Oh,
If you,
100%. And it's because I mean, it's real while you're watching it, or even watching Bunraku puppetry, where you can literally see the puppeteers. You see them at all times, and they're, cloaked in black, they're covered in black, but they're there. They're human beings in the same space as you are, but your mind edits them out because you're so focused on the narrative and the beauty of what they're doing, and you're reacting to the puppets, not to the puppeteers. If the puppeteer is really good, they disappear.
yeah,
And yeah, and even learning about just the ways that the art form has been used throughout human history. That's why I love research, because research will always tell me, you go into it wanting to learn about, okay, I need to know about X thing. And you learn so much more, not only about that thing, but about questions you never even, knew you could ask or should ask, or that had answers. Yeah, I love puppetry.
well, another one of your works, a collection of short stories named Velocities, collects stories from very different eras of your life. Do you see a consistent Kathe Koja obsession running through all of them? Or do you feel like you're reading the work of a stranger in some of the older stories?
I never see any of that. I always figure that is for other people to look at if they want to, or if they want to find a consistent thread. I'm never that far outside of it to think of it that way. So I do think that everything that I have done, and I've worked in a lot of different genres. I've written a lot of YA novels, historical fiction, and what all those things share, as far as I can see, is an attraction to intensity, and people who are living very intensely, people who are um, questioning their lives very intensely. In the young adult books that I wrote, that is a time in most of our lives when we are possibly the most honest with ourselves that we will ever be, before we decide, okay, I'm grown and now I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, and I'm not going to ask those questions anymore. But young people are fearless in that way, and they're very brave, and they will ask those questions. And that kind of intensity is attractive to me. And I always like to know, what would happen if, how do you live that way? How do you ask those questions? And like my puppeteers, or like the book Christopher Wilde, that's about, it's kind of retelling the life of the playwright and spy Christopher Marlowe in three different eras. What would that person have been like in each of those eras? And people who have not lost that edge of intensity are interesting to me.
Well, I have not read your work, Catherine the Ghost, but from what I understand, it's a feminist retelling of Wuthering Heights.
Catherine the Ghost is another one. I've been a fan of Emily Bronte since the first time I read Wuthering Heights when I was 10 years old. And I was like, wow, these people are they're not fucking playing. This is great. People can do this in books. Wow.
Uh,
And that, again, that is a story of complete intensity and of trying to draw the line between what is, again, in reality too. I've always been surprised that Wuthering Heights is not, to my thinking, not as celebrated a ghost story as it should have been, which is why my book is called Catherine the Ghost, because the people in this book 100% believe in the supernatural. They 100% believe that it can interact with, the day-to-day quotidian human world. And I had never really seen that. I was not aware that it had been explored as much as I would like to explore it. And I thought, as coming to that story and having Kathe of Kathe and Heathcliff, Kathe tell her own story, because in Wuthering Heights, Kathe's dead. She's dead for the whole thing. And we are hearing about her second and third hand from, from other people who knew her, or people who, have skin in the game and might have a reason for misrepresenting her. Wuthering Heights was also the book that taught me that there could be such thing as an unreliable narrator. And I've read that book like a billion times. And on one of the readings, I'm like, wait a minute, you know, I don't think I trust Nellie Dean. I think that, and then when you go back and read it, you're like, oh my God, she's been lying the whole time. She's super manipulative and, da 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 da. And that's such a sophisticated and layered narrative. And I cannot love Emily Bronte enough for her artistry. The idea that we are seeing, it's like a nesting doll of a narrative. You're seeing it through this person's eyes, but then it's being told to you by this person who is telling you that this other person that said this, but you don't know that that's true either. So you really have to decide, who do I believe here? And what do I think is true in the story? I also produced and directed a live adaptation
oh,
of Wuthering Heights called The Heights. And at the end, the idea of this immersive production was that you were within the narrative in this confined space, while Nellie is telling you the story, the way she's telling the person, reading the book, the story. And at the end, because it's always struck me with this book, all the people who do like the good moral things are all jerks. They're all like mean or creepy, or, they're like Nellie, or they're like Edgar Linton or his horrible sister. And so I thought, all these people that are wanting to do like the right and moral thing, they all kind of come to grief in a way. But the people who try to do what they believe is right. Um, Kathe, in some sense, is doing the right thing by marrying the rich guy and, supposed to be having this safe and stable life. And she destroys herself, and she destroys Heathcliff, and almost destroys the next generation of offspring, because she was doing like the right thing. So I asked people, we did it in a gallery, and I asked people, should people do the right thing or should they do the good thing? Which should they do? And we couldn't figure out how to get people to write on the walls with like paintbrushes and stuff. So we just said, all right, fuck it, we'll get finger paint. And we did. And we had finger paint in a bowl. And when it was time for people to leave the playing space, we invited them. I invited them, you know, if you want, make a comment about this. And this ritual immediately ensued that I had nothing to do with. I didn't set it up this way, but I gave the person the little bowl of, finger paint, and they wrote whatever they wrote on the wall. And then they handed it very sort of ceremoniously to the next person in line. And not everybody, would do it, but the people who did do it were super serious about it. And I still remember one of the things someone wrote was, why do we have to choose? And I thought, oh, that's so, anguished kind of. And so, what a wonderful question. But people took it dead seriously and really grappled with that question of why it's true that all the things that were supposed to be like right caused enormous pain and didn't really do any good. So why are we doing them? Why should we do them? On the other hand, what else can we do if not that? So, and that, I think that is the kind of energy, and that's what we were inviting for Dark Factory, for people to grapple with those questions the same way and to feel part of it in the same way, that those questions are being asked of them too, not just of the performers. And at one point, the woman who was playing Kathe, dead Kathe, came up to Heathcliff. There's the scene where Heathcliff is like trying to dig her grave, dig her up. He's having a meltdown and he's trying to dig her out of the ground. And we had a thing of potting soil, was Kathe's graveyard dirt. And at one point, the woman who was playing Kathe, Rachel Taylor, went up to people with little handfuls of this graveyard dirt and tried to put it in their hands. And some people were like, no way, and some people saved their dirt. And I remember a person telling me, I put it in a bag and I wrote Wuthering Heights on it and I saved it in a Ziploc bag. But yeah, it was that whole idea of this experience it's for you and it's for you to be part of and make something out of it. That is something that I want to do with everything that I do, and invite people to come in, as far as they want to go.
Well, from what I understand, you rely on only 3 first readers. One of those is your husband, Rick Leader. What kind of feedback actually changes your mind, and what kind makes you double down on your original instinct?
It really depends. If it feels correct to me, if I feel that there's a weak spot, or if I feel that, mostly I'm looking to see, is it being understood? And if it's not being understood, then that's a problem. Then I have to go back and fix it. For the rest of the readers, if they all come back with the same question or issue or criticism, that's something to pay attention to. It's like I'm not getting across what I'm trying to get across. And they're all extremely honest, and because it's no good any other way. I don't want to hear, at that point, you need the person to be completely honest and tell you what works and what doesn't, mostly what doesn't. And then you can go back and fix it. But in the end, it's really, I remember working with an editor on one of the YA books, and she felt very strongly, she didn't like the tag end at the very end of the book. And we really went back and forth on it. And she was a very great editor. I respected her a lot. She's no longer alive. Frances Foster. She's just a legend in children's publishing. And we really tussled on this. And finally she said, it's your book and you should do what you want. And I felt extremely strongly that it was the correct thing, the correct way to end the book. And later she came back and said, I think that was right. I think it feels right. I wasn't feeling right to me at the time, but I think it was right. And that's not because I knew better than Frances. It's because I saw it in a different way than she did. And I was able to see, no, that's right. That's the way it should be. Sometimes I don't know why things are in the books the way they are until the very end, but I know they belong there. It's like saying, I know this lamp has to sit on this table in this room, and I don't know why, but I know it has to be there because, at the very end of the book, somebody turns it on. You know what I mean? It's that kind of, the narrative has its own energy and it's all there. It's just a question of getting it out. And you don't want to get in the way of that ever. You don't want to impose your own thoughts or strictures on it. It's there to, you're there to make it. It's not there for you. You're there for it.
So you're kind of the mindset, like a lot of authors are, that they're not creating it, they're just channeling it. Or is that too much of a simplification of it?
I
They're transmitting it, so to speak.
I would go back to Felix in Dark Factory and how Felix feels that all this is there for him to, but it also takes all your skill and all your creativity and all your work to make it happen. So the channeling makes it sound too easy,
Yeah.
and that's why I would resist that word. But it exists in itself and for itself, and it's your job to get that out as purely and completely as you can. And that does call on, skill, and that does call on experience, and it does call on, lots of strengths that you hope you have when you sit down to work.
Yeah. Well, you state that you do minimal rewriting. Does that preserve the raw voice? And if so, what raw edge and dark matter's rave philosophy would vanish under heavy polish?
I just don't, again, if I'm hearing feedback that says, I don't understand what this is, or I don't know what they're doing, or I don't know why this is happening, I would look at that very closely because the whole point is to communicate. In a lot of ways, first idea, best idea. And because you're not getting in the way of, I will go back and, make sure, again, that it's understood, make sure that everything's there that has to be there. But I am not a heavy rewriter ever. I never have been. And the more I have to do that, the harder. The most rewriting I've ever done, but it was because it was necessary, was in the performances that I did, and the shows, because a lot of times you begin the experience of creating the performance, and so much of that is so dependent on the other people you're collaborating with the performers, and whoever might be involved in that particular show, that, yeah, a lot of times I had to change things, but it felt correct to change them. It's like I originally conceptualized this as this. It's like I did a performance of Marlowe's Faustus. I was trying to secure a building, to rent a building. And literally, I am there with my checkbook. I am ready to roll. And the person from whom I was renting pulled something out of his butt that would have made this impossible. I'm like, wait, what now? What did you just say? And so I left. I said, I'm not renting under those conditions. Goodbye. And I had already sold tickets to this show. I had a intense fear of not having any place to perform it.
Yeah. It's kind of a done
So,
deal at that point.
yeah, well, it wasn't great. It wasn't great. And I'm like, all right, I have a splitting headache, but that's okay. We'll figure it out. And one of the performers said, well, have you talked to such and such people at this Unitarian church? They always have they have a rentable space in there. Maybe that's something we could use. So I went over there and I looked at the rentable space. It was horrible. I said, oh no, all right. And as I was getting ready to leave, the person showing me around said, well, we do rent the sanctuary too. I said, wait, what?
Sanctuary.
What now? The church space?
Oh.
The actual, yeah, right? It's like, are you for real? I said, you do know that we're doing Faustus. And they said, oh, Kathe, we're Unitarians. We don't care.
Oh, okay, okay.
Okay, cool.
Whatever your spiritual journey is,
Oh,
just
it was
fuck it.
right. It's fantastic. They were so welcoming and so kind to us. And in fact, their music minister and organist, this took place in a beautiful old church in Detroit, with one of the this really badass pipe organ, just fantastic. And he asked me, who's doing your music? And I said, I don't have anybody do. We're not doing any music. And he said, well, do you want music? And I'm like, well, sure, that'd be great. But he's like, no, I'm asking you, do you want me to play for you? And he did. And he brought an entire, different component of intensity and craziness to the show that we would never have had without him. But the original concept for the show had to change completely when it took place in a church. And so that was all rewritten, and much to the benefit of the performance and the experience, because being able to bring the devil into church, I mean. How can you not?
Hell
That
yeah.
it was fantastic. But yeah, I had no idea that was going to happen. And so my original idea had to be, deeply overhauled. But in those cases, and again, it's that same thing you're following the thing that you're making, you're trying to figure out what's the best way to make this thing that wants to be made. And then you go with that.
Yeah. Well, speaking of music, you are a techno fan, a music built on mechanical repetition and transcendence. How does that nonverbal, repetitive intensity translate into the rhythm and emotional logic of your prose?
Oh, I think it is very much it's very much the same idea of being part of something that has its own organic life in that sense. If you listen to a really gifted DJ play a techno set, you end up in a much different place from the place you started. You really have gone on a journey.
Oh, yeah.
And especially because it does not use words or lyrics to communicate. There might be voice in there, or there might be, but it's not, a lyric-based
Just
music.
samples.
It
Yeah.
sounds, and I like to think of techno as taking place kind of from here down to the knees. That's where it lives. It lives. It is not asking you questions in that sense. It's
Mm,
asking you to react. It's
primal.
inviting you to experience it, and it's dancing, but it's also listening. It's also feeling it, because a really good DJ knows how to communicate those things. And I would push back a little bit at primal, because that implies
Mindless.
yeah, and it is
Yeah.
not that at all. It's almost and I'm thinking of Felix, playing a set, and his intellectual powers are very much part of what he's making, like any great DJ would be, but he is creating, and not it's not thinking create it's that's in there, that's part of it. The same way listening is part of it. The same way feeling is part of it, but it is not a strictly intellectual activity. So it doesn't need that from you. What it asks is a different kind of participation. And
Would you say it's more like a really concentrated flow state?
yeah,
Yeah.
100%. Because if you are really in a set and it just goes on, and when it finally ends, you are just depleted, but in the best possible way. Like, wow, this is wow. I went to he's not a techno artist, but I went to a very surprising one-off performance by Yonsei from Sigur, and it took place in a bank building. There was an art installation there, and Yonsei's friends or knew the artist or whatever. There was some reason for him being there, but he was performing on this mezzanine level, and the people who were there to hear him were underneath. And at the very back of this enormous bank building was this whole other opening going on, where people were chit-chatting and having drinks and whatever. And all this other, it was like same planet, different worlds. And when Jonesy was finished performing, and I remember coming out of that bank, and it was just snowing very softly. It was a cold night and snowing, and it's dark, and I didn't even know what planet I was on. It was so great and involving, and it took you not so much out of yourself, but it opened yourself up. And yeah, it was that, and that's the kind of thing that I think all art aspires to bring you to a place of not self-forgetfulness, but yourself is not a burden, or is not a watcher, or is not sitting there with its arms folded saying, entertain me, or, it's participatory, and it's also very nutritive. It's the real thing. It's the pure thing. And you are being part of the pure thing. And that just feels great. It's wonderful. Everybody go out and be part of the pure thing as often as you can. It will change your life. You'll be a happier person.
Indeed. Have you ever heard of Tale of Us
Yes.
and the performances they do with Afterlife?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that I've never seen them live, but they play the Sphere in Vegas a lot.
Right.
And I just cannot imagine what that would be like.
And that's a real interesting space too. That's another thing that is going to ask of its performers something very strict in some ways, because it is such an overwhelming venue that you need to meet it. How does this mesh with the work that I'm trying to do? Because it could just as easily be mindless spectacle in a place like that. And it's going to blow your mind no matter what, because it's just so mind-blowing.
Yeah.
But how do you get that flow experience without it becoming cheesy or bombastic, or, you would have to really walk a fine line in a place like that.
Yeah, my wife went to go visit her aunt in Vegas and saw The Wizard of Oz at the Sphere. Well, I meant to ask you before we started, did you want to read a passage from the book?
Oh, yes, I do.
Okay.
If I can reach it. Don't fall out of your chair. She was never seen again. I know, right? She was never seen again. I'm going to read something of Bunny's because Bunny is just raw energy and she's a lot of fun. Okay, Bunny comes into the book and she could get a jump or take the train, but she prefers to keep her feet under her, boots on the ground. People always ask, how can you walk in those things? But she can run in heels and has. In the rain, on ice, up metal stairs, she can crack bottle glass or stomp a hole through chipboard. Thomas paid for these boots, his first purchase for her, not counting the ice cafe and the Zurich hotel room. When they got to Berlin, he took her to a fetish bootmaker who measured her feet, then asked what sort of heels she wanted, and smiled when she said railroad spikes. These boots are the second best thing Thomas ever gave her. Ari Reagan is the first. Her trek today cuts through this humid, restless borough, row houses with potted plants looped to stoops with heavy wire, members-only cafes, and smoke shops ringed by skittish tourists, dividing with her stride the other pedestrians as she heads for her noodle bar meeting with Ari's PA, Una Dean. Una's work handle is Unicorn 16, and Unicorn 16 is not easy to lure away from their protective workspace. But they believe this in-person meeting was specifically requested by Thomas on Ari's behalf. In fact, Thomas knows nothing about it. And Bunny goes on to talk about what she expects to happen or what she wants to happen with Ari and Felix, and she ends up having the meeting with Unicorn 16. Is there a reason, says Unicorn 16, carefully folding their napkin, that Mr. Hay wanted us to talk live and not on cross-channel? That account's fully secure. I spread the whole earth out as a map before me. On no one spot of its surface could I put my finger and say, here is safety. What? Thanks for taking the time. Stepping away to pay the tab, learning just what she needed to learn. That next weekend's in-person meet will include Felix and Bergeron, but Ari will not be on the plane. Ari will stay behind alone. Thomas does not know that, maybe even Felix does not, but Unicorn 16 did, though Unicorn 16 has no idea they shared that information. They were professional but guarded. They kept Ari's name out of the conversation, and that they could was to tell. And she thinks about what is she going to do when she gets Ari alone on this weekend. Her original plan was to just sort of overwhelm him, but then she knew better, knew not to go at Ari full bore, but from the sides, all the sides, carving away everyone else and everything else, and then put herself in that empty space and say, let's go. And that moment will be worth all the wait and all the work. She saw that when they finally met. On her feet, between the blue frosted windows and the rubber plant, watching Ari walk in. Bespoke pinstripe vest and black diamond earrings. He barely shook her hand, but when they touched, he felt her. She knows he did, because she felt him. A warm shock, electric as sex, but not sex. And when he did not speak, would not, "I'm Bunny Graves," she said. "You're a great dancer."
Yes,
Yeah,
indeed.
she knows what she wants, and she's quite correct in the way that she views Ari. She knows what he is. She knows what he is, and maybe more purely than anyone else in all the books. She knows exactly, more so even than Felix. She knows what he is.
Well, last question. What is the life of Kathe Koja like outside of writing?
Well, I have two very bad little cats, as we talked about before we
Yeah,
started.
they have been
They've been
quarantined.
sequestered. They've been quarantined out. Yeah, we adopted two cats early this year, and we haven't had kittens for a minute. So it was, talk about chaos. They're always a jump ahead of you, and they're always, figuring out things before you can figure them out. So I do volunteer for different animal rights groups, and I'm a very strong believer in humane treatment of animals. I'm a vegan. I try to see animals as the individuals that they are, and not as components to be plugged into the human world when we need them. The same way I hate watching, if people do not know the site Does the Dog Die, I heartily recommend it for all films and any shows or films or whatever. You can always look on that site, and they have a lot of different triggers and things that you might want to know if it's present in a film. But I do not like to see animals harmed, even pretend, and I deeply recommend Does the Dog Die. Yes, I'm a big animal person. I am pretty boring. I work a lot. I like to work. I like to collaborate and meet collaborators and talk about art. But I am not a party girl.
All right.
Well, not 100%, not a party girl. But yeah, I
still like to dance.
Oh, I love to dance.
Yeah.
I love to dance. I'm a very good dancer too. Not as good as Ari, but I'm a good dancer. And to get the work done, you really have to work. So I do work like a lot, and I love working. It might seem like I could take more time off, but I don't want to. I have so much fun doing what I do. So
awesome. Well, Kathe, it has been a pleasure talking with you.
This was so fun.
Absolutely. Well, as we bring the show to a close, is there anything you'd like to plug or let your readers know about? Anything you'd like to reiterate?
I would like to ask people to go check out the darkfactory.club site and just look at all the fun things that people have done there, and the things that Trisha has created, and the things that, people have, the art and stuff that's there. It really is a fun experience all by itself. And I would invite people to do that. And I would invite people to get in touch with me on socials. I'm on Instagram, Blue Sky, Facebook, or through my site, alwayskathekoja.com.
Got it. All right. Well, listeners at home, all those links are in the description. And Kathe, thank you again for joining me.
Thank you. This is great.
And thank you to everyone who tuned in. If you enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Be sure to tune in next Tuesday for a new episode featuring the best and brightest authors and filmmakers of dark literature and film. So until then, stay healthy, stay sane, and as always, thank you for listening. See you next time.